We need more well-intentioned rule breakers in education. Right now, 53% of students are disengaged from school. That's not because teachers don't care. It's because we've accidentally built cultures of compliance instead of curiosity. We've created classrooms where students sit quietly, they follow worksheets and hunt for right answers instead of asking better questions. And here's the brutal truth: when you're managing 40 plus students in survival mode, compliance feels like your only option. But what's the cost? Burnt out teachers who can't give their best, students who see school as something to endure rather than enjoy, and a generation learning that playing it safe matters more than thinking differently. If we keep choosing compliance over curiosity, we're not just losing teachers, we're losing the very thing education is supposed to ignite. Today's guest walked away from teaching at the height of his career, but not before giving his students an unforgettable grand finale. Ryan Hennessey is here to challenge everything you know about creating classrooms where students actually want to learn, why vulnerability might be your most powerful teaching tool, and how to stay whole while doing the hardest job in education. I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so that we create campus experiences worth showing up for. Thanks to Ruckus Makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of all podcasts worldwide. So thank you so much for pressing play today. So once again, thanks for listening, and we'll be right back after a few messages from our show sponsors. Still scrambling for supplies like it's 1999? ODP Business Solutions streamlines everything from pencils to projectors so you can focus on what matters, making an impact. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Today's episode of Better Leaders, Better Schools is brought to you by Play Piper. The innovators of tomorrow are sitting in classrooms today, but only if we give them the right tools. Piper's STEM kits connect kids' love of gaming with real-world coding and engineering, turning curiosity into career-ready skills. Keep your students engaged and inspired. Learn more at playpiper.com. That's playpiper.com. IXL is a go-to support for classroom teachers because its adaptive platform makes differentiated instruction easy. See for yourself and get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right. And Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Excited for this. You know, your beard game is strong right now. I'm not sporting. I've had some very massive beards in the past, but right now it's a smaller look. Want to encourage the Ruckus Maker who's engaging in this content, check out the video. You can see my curly locks. You can see Ryan's epic beard, and you'll be very happy to have done that. But enough about, how amazingly handsome we both are. I want you to, Ryan, bring us to a point where you realize you had to choose between giving your best to students versus giving your best to your family. Some that Ruckus Makers can resonate with. And just please bring us to that moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, teaching has been such a gift for me. It was my passion. It was the thing that really forced me to take responsibility in my life and level up. And I think a lot of what brought me to be a passionate educator was that love for creating something that I didn't have, which was finding relevance, finding the motivation, tapping into our just natural curiosity, and how do we actually create spaces that are fun and students want to be a part of. So when I became a teacher, I poured everything into it, and I had a lot of fun with it. And then in April of 2024, my daughter was born, and anybody with kids knows that it takes an enormous amount of energy just to show up and be present for them. And suddenly I was torn between this tension of how do I or I can't show up for my students in the way that I feel that they deserve, or in my family in the way that they deserve. So I was just torn, and it lasted about 6 months of showing up where it's like either I'm fully present for my family and giving them what they need, and then I show up to school and I'm pushing worksheets and I'm doing the bare minimum because I don't have the time and capacity to, or I'm doing the opposite where I'm taking all of my work home and I'm spending long hours on the couch trying to get stuff done and caught up. And so it really kind of became this suffocating, what was this thing that was the most incredible profession that really turned me into this person that I am today, suddenly became this thing that was suffocating and keeping me small and forcing me to kind of not show up in areas of my life that I was passionate about.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Did you have a question on that, or?
No, well, I was just going to add on to that. I mean, I don't have children yet, but I can imagine, when I listen to entrepreneurs on podcasts, they say like getting fired or having a kid is the thing that pushes them to figure it out, right?
Right.
And same for you. It's just figuring out looked a bit different, right? Like where do you want to lean into and be present and that kind of thing. And you were forced, to sort of make a choice, and you made what was right for you and your family. You said something in there that was well, you said a lot of things that were interesting, but one thread I want to pull on, you said that teaching pushed you to take responsibility for your life. Can you tell
Yeah.
us more about that?
I mean, my history with the education is that I was just a student. I was the kid that just acted out, misbehaved, didn't do the work because it wasn't because I wasn't capable, but it was because
Mm,
I didn't see the relevance. I didn't connect the dots of like, why is this important and how does this actually pertain to real life?
yeah.
And that pattern was my entire adulthood until I became a teacher, because even in undergrad, I just wasn't making the dot or connecting the dots of why is this important to what I want to do with my life. And then I got into the classroom and it was like week one, I fell in love with it. I'm like, holy shit, we can show up for these students in a way that allows them to feel like they're actually a part of this and to be excited about what they're learning and to ask good questions. And it forced me from being kind of this, I guess you would say, selfish, small minded person to really then pour myself into something that was for a greater good,
Mm,
and to become organized and to become efficient and to learn skills I didn't have and to become, man, it cracks you open in terms of vulnerability and empathy and being a human who works with other humans every single day in a way that I wasn't prepared for,
mm,
and that could never, I'll forever be grateful for that cracking open, that it rewired me entirely as a person.
mm, mm. How do you define sort of like small minded or playing a small game versus whatever the opposite of that is?
That's a good question. I think I was on autopilot for so long of
Mm,
just like checking the boxes, go to college, get the degree. I didn't really care. I wasn't passionate. When I got out of college, I actually didn't have a lot of interest in teaching. I went
mm,
off and I did some HVAC technician career for a while until I really hated that. And I'm like, I'm going to give this teaching thing a try. So I wasn't even fully passionate about it until it became a classroom of my own where where I had the responsibility of creating content and building relationships. And so I think it really tied back to agency. And
mm.
I didn't take agency for my life, and I didn't have a passion and a purpose that I was able to funnel my creation into. I was just going through the box or checking the boxes, going through life on autopilot.
The Ruckus Maker Do School Different point of view is all about reimagining sort of the experience kids have, even within a traditional setting, so that we create a campus experience where it's showing up for. And in your intro story, you talked about creating spaces that students want to be a part of. So how did you used to, do that, I guess, to see kids, foster that belonging, maybe help them connect the dots, stuff that wasn't, necessarily happening or resonating with you as a student. But yeah, how'd you create those spaces students wanted to be a part of?
I think it's kind of multifolded or all sorts of different aspects that go into it, but it's really creating spaces of, building relationships with students was kind of number one. How do we actually see them as a human, allow them to feel seen and heard, to make mistakes and not to immediately just like judge them for the person or shut them down so they don't have an opportunity to learn from the mistake. It's also creating lessons that are fun. And I know that's kind of a hot point because students do need to be able to do things that aren't fun. right? But I think the
Hmm.
more that we create these lessons that students actually want to be a part of, the more we are forging these connections in their brain of like, hey, this is something I want to be a part of. I want to learn more, and we deepen their capacity for doing this, the not fun stuff, anytime that they
Hmm.
start making these associations in their brain of like, hey, because I taught science both middle school and high school. And
Yeah.
once a week, I would try to create a lesson that was fun and enjoyable and engaging. And then, of course, there's all sorts of stuff in there that's not that fun. But because the
Hmm.
students are creating this association with like, hey, this class is actually kind of fun and it's a space where I feel like I belong, it ends up creating this motivation that persists through the less fun pieces as well.
Hmm. Fun's a weird like concept too because it's sort of a moving goalpost in a sense. Because what you think is fun, what I think is fun, could be completely different. And the
Hmm.
interesting thing, I had a social post that, man, teachers out there on social media like were really upset with me, throwing daggers for sure. And it's all good. But
Yeah.
what the funniest part about it is that they all they did was demonstrate a lack of being able to read, which is like super funny to me because they only read the headline, which
Oh,
was
right.
there to grab their attention, but they
Hmm.
didn't read the punchline, which is here's what we can do. Headline was
Yeah.
53% of students are disengaged from school, right? And that's from a
Yeah.
Gallup study that they did with kids. That's an alarming stat. That's over half our
Yeah.
kids, at least in the US, saying, I could care less. I am totally checked out. That's a big problem
Right.
we need to solve. And my insight was, oh, well, the problem's clear. We're not creating a can't miss experience for kids.
Hmm.
That's like the do school different riff. And what teachers read that as, and I don't know why, they said, I'm not a clown. I'm not a
Yep.
part of the circus. My job's not to entertain. I didn't say any of those things, but they
Right.
put all of that on top of it. And I think you could actually kind of have like a monotone voice and maybe even be a little bit boring. But if kids know you care and you
Yep.
understand them and what makes them tick and what motivates them, they'll still want to be a part of your can't miss experience. You don't have to have a honk a clown type of nose,
Right.
to come in.
Right.
Nobody's saying that. And it would be weird, right? Imagine if you
Yeah.
dressed up as a clown because you thought that's what you should do. That if I was a principal and I had a teacher do that, like, oh, I need to be entertained, I would have some big problems. It'd be absolutely frightening for me.
They're completely different things, right? And
Yeah.
I've riffed a little bit on that thread as well of like there's teachers who kind of feel like it's their calling and they pour way more than they should and they create
Yep.
these lessons and environments and they that's on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have a lot of teachers that are like, listen, these are the duties of my job.
Hmm.
I am expected to show up and do these things. I'm going to collect my paycheck and I'm going to go home. I'm not going to burn
Yeah.
myself out. And both parties kind of there's a tension between the two, right?
Mm.
I kind of think in reality we need both. And I think there is a general slide of teachers who start on the one end of like, I'm going to pour everything in. And then over time, they come to
Get
realize like that
tired,
maybe isn't
disillusioned.
sustainable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I like your point though that like it's probably both are needed, but I think there needs to be some flexibility in those. Like I think you could still not necessarily give up your life and still create engaging lessons and be connected to kids,
Right.
but you got to have boundaries. You got to honor those. You got to figure out, you have to also be lucky enough to work in a system and with a leader that gets, okay, I'm not going to just keep piling BS onto your plate. Like my job is actually to make your role easier and simpler so you can be a star for your students. And that
Right.
simply is not the case. I mean, I wish it was true, but I've been in so many schools. I'm scared to say this, but there's a lot of really bad educators and leaders out there, right?
Oh
They're
yeah.
not all high quality. It's just not what
Right.
it is. So
And part of that is a product of the system we live in too, where it
sure,
is a
sure.
hyper vigilant system. And it's like anybody who is a little bit of a ruckus maker from time to time is
Mhm.
probably going to get told to quiet down and to fall in line and to do things the way that everybody else does it. So you really do, like you said, need a leader that sees the value, sees the worth in what you're doing, and allows you to
Mhm.
flourish that and to run with it, and to know that sometimes by innovating and trying new things, things aren't going to go to plan. They're going to blow up in your face as a teacher who tries things. But when you have the trust with your students and you have the trust with the parents that, hey, I'm going to try some things and not everything's going to go to plan.
Hmm.
It builds this level of trust. And then also you need the trust of an administrator to back you in those times, because they see that, hey, 9 times out of 10 or 19 times out of 20, things are going really
It
well.
does
Every
work,
once in
right?
a while, things do fall apart because of the freedom you allowed your students.
I may have been asked by principals before, "What are you doing?" Right? Like, but I was running an experiment and seeing what would catch kids and yeah, get their engagement and connection, through the classroom and that kind of thing. But
Right.
let's talk about how you left, because I think it was interesting. Like I think you had a speech prepared or something
Yeah.
like that. Or in a letter too that you sent out. But can you talk to us about that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I'll start by saying, the notion to leave was kind of over the last couple of years. I could feel myself burning out. I could feel myself being more of this, like, I don't have the energy to give the students what I feel they deserve. I'm becoming more of a teacher that I don't want to be, like, grumpy. And I'm not saying that those are, but I was feeling my capacity draining and I was burning out. And so I went to this, I knew I wanted to start a business. I went to this retreat in December of last year, and the retreat was for heart-led business owners. Like, how do you launch something that is aligned with your life and it takes your gifts and you bring it to the world? And that's where it really crystallized for me. Like, I need to leave teaching. And I think I need to leave teaching before the end of this year, because I'm in the cycle of, like, when summer comes, that's when I'll get working on this business. And then when summer comes, it's like, June is recovery mode. July is like vacations. And then August is back to workshops. And so nothing ever actually happened. So I made the decision to leave in December, but I knew I didn't want to just, like, not show up for work on Monday. I got to work and I worked with my wife and pulled together family resources of, like, how would I walk away from teaching, giving my students the best gifts that I know how? How do I leave within my integrity and have it be more of an example for students of, like, if something's no longer a fit for you, you shouldn't just sit and be miserable and suffocate. You should choose something, a path for yourself that is truly yours. And so I didn't actually leave the classroom until March 7th. But in between that time, I was creating this, what I called my grand finale of teaching. And it was a series of speeches that I read to my students that really built up to this culmination of, like, you should choose yourself. You should question the systems around you. You should find ways to do things that light your soul on fire and that make you happy and to bring you joy, and to constantly ask yourself, like, what is it that I truly want? Not just what do other people want for me? And so that was kind of the series of speeches. And then the content that I created stayed within the curriculum that we were actually learning, but it took some of my best lessons that I'd created throughout my career and it plugged them into a 2 week, like, full. I have these giant Legos. I have, like, they're all 1 foot long and 6 inches high. And I have enough of them where I was able to create my classroom into 4 mini classrooms and create escape rooms with little hidden hatches and doorways. And so I was teaching Earth Systems at the time in AP Environmental Science, and so I was able to create this full-scale escape room. I didn't actually lock the students in, but there were closed doors and lock boxes, and it was like an immersive experience for
Yeah.
them to solve the mystery of the missing scientist, right? And they had to, like, do Earth Systems type of work to kind of solve some of these puzzles and riddles. We used the Legos and we did engineering design challenges. We did, I'm trying to think of all the different lessons, but it was like that, where I was taking all of these really great hands-on experiences that are overwhelming to create as a teacher. And I called in support of, like, I need somebody to help with childcare and I need this extra time so I can stay at school, put all of this together, and just poured everything into it so that I could leave within my integrity and giving my students the gifts that I wish I had when I was in school.
Yeah. It's what I like about it, how teaching pushed you to take responsibility of your life. You're taking responsibility for how you left, right?
Right.
And you left on your terms. As Frank Sinatra would say, right? You did it your way. And I love that
Yeah.
you were teaching your students, to be ruckus makers, to question everything. And that's and I'm trying to teach that to educators and specifically the school administrators, right? Like,
Right.
why are we doing these things? How are they
Yeah.
serving us? How are they serving our communities? And if it's not, then why? Why are we doing it? Like, we
Right.
have power. We have power. And I think a lot of times ruckus makers forget how powerful they are. And
Mhm.
yeah, part of my life work over the last decade has been turning on that light so Ruckus Makers can remember how much power they do have. Okay.
Right.
I think we'll break here just for a second to get some messages in from our sponsors. But when we come back, some topics I'd love to jam on is like, how is school, like the traditional model, not working for students and teachers? How are schools, operating in defend mode versus explore mode? And you had a master's thesis on the role of vulnerability in the classroom that I think the Ruckus Maker listening will be interested in. So. All right. We'll be back soon.
Look forward to it.
ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Let's talk about what keeps Ruckus Makers up at night. Creating engaging learning spaces while juggling budgets, safety protocols, and those endless supply lists. Here's the game changer. ODP Business Solutions helps you tackle it all. We're not just another vendor, we're your strategic partner in transformation. Want to turn a tired computer lab into a STEAM innovation center? We'll help design it. Need to keep 8 schools stocked and spotless? We've got sustainable solutions that scale. Looking to upgrade from whiteboards to interactive displays? We'll guide you through the entire process. And the best part, you can get it all from a single supplier. That helps you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. As educators, we've all seen it. That bright student who checks out of math or science because they feel it's just not for them. Play Piper is here to change that. With award-winning STEM kits and coding curriculum, students move from passive learning to active building. They see how creativity, problem solving, and innovation all come together, and they love it. If you're looking to bring more engagement into your classroom, discover how Piper supports teachers and empowers students at playpiper.com. Again, that's playpiper.com to learn more. Teachers love the support that IXL provides in the classroom, and Ruckus Makers love it all as well because IXL also gives school leaders meaningful insights on every level. Put your finger on the pulse of student performance with IXL and its dashboard to drill down to see progress and growth for individual students. You can even customize reports to hone in on the information that matters most to you. IXL helps Ruckus Makers make data-informed decisions that will benefit their students' growth goals. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and we're back with Ryan Hennessey, and we've been covering a lot of really interesting topics. But what do we want to jump into here is, in your view, what's not working with the traditional model in terms of what's not working for students and also for educators?
Yeah. I think the reason, and you spoke earlier in the podcast about this stat of 53 students or 53% of students feeling disengaged. I think that really lies at the core of everything that we're looking at, because when you talk to educators today and you ask them about their opinion on what it's like to be a teacher, they talk about apathy, about students not caring. They talk about copying, cheating, ChatGPT, all of these things that really at the core of it is just they don't care. The motivation for learning is not there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we've created unintentionally, and it feels like the system more than the educators, because when you look closely, the educators care deeply about their work, but they're
Right.
part of this larger system that kind of undermines that work. And so I think we've created these cultures of compliance rather than fueling and sparking curiosity. Because when you have, I mean, in my experience, so I taught middle school and high school, and I had classes of 46 sometimes. I mean, it hovered somewhere between 32 and 46 14-year-olds in a classroom trying to learn science, which is bonkers. And when you have that many students, like the only thing you can do to survive is to create these cultures of compliance where it's like, sit down, be quiet, stay in your seat. And here's the worksheet. And these are the right answers that I'm looking for. Right. And so what that does is it squashes students' curiosity and it squashes their agency. And I don't mean to say that it's impossible to break free of those, because I think that's ultimately where I'd say we need to go. Is It's difficult, and it's really the juice is worth the squeeze in terms of breaking free of that mindset. But those are kind of the systems at play that I feel like have led to students' disengagement and increased behavior problems and teachers feeling burnt out because their students aren't caring. They're not buying into what they're saying. And then you have this, like, they're doing the bare minimum. So going back to talking about how do we actually create disruptive education? How do the Ruckus Makers take their compliance classrooms and actually introduce spaces where students want to be and lessons that excite them and bring them fire and passion? It takes that, hey, I'm just going to do the absolute bare minimum to get the C and pass this class so I don't get kicked off the dance team, to I want to learn more, teach me more, or how can I access information for myself? And like, that's what real meaningful learning is all about.
Yeah, right on. And when you're thinking about school operations, Ryan, and you're talking about defend mode versus explore mode, what's that all about?
Yeah, defend mode versus explore mode. I'm trying to think back to that was in our conversation a while ago. So the explore mode versus defend mode is really just when you're feeling safe in your environment, right? So you think of like animals that are in defend mode. You think of a skittish bunny or a deer or something that's always walking on eggshells looking for threats.
Yeah.
And then when you think of explore mode, you'd think of something like a bear or a lion or something that's able to actually take in the surroundings and walk comfortably through that space. And so when we create these classrooms of hypervigilance, which is like if you're sitting in a classroom and you know that the teacher is just ready to pounce on you for any misstep that you take, you're in defend mode. You're not in a space in which you feel comfortable exploring and taking chances with your learning or speaking out or anything, or even asking questions, because you're kind of walking on eggshells. And the same thing goes for educators working in buildings where there's where the administration is looking out for like every single misstep instead of treating you like a human and a professional and having trust that you are making informed decisions that are at the root is what's best for students.
What would you say to somebody who's thinking, well, Ryan, in a hypothetical classroom or whatever, an ideal classroom, like it's great. We want all the kids in explore mode, feeling safe, whatever, but you don't know my students. And if I'm not hyper vigilant and keeping them in line, it's just going to be chaos all the time. Right. Yeah. I'm just curious, how might you respond to somebody that has that critique?
I honestly think it goes back to creating spaces where students want to be, right? Because you're right. I've been in those classrooms where the other teachers are in charge, and it's just like everybody, every inch they give, students take a mile. And so it's a long road back from that. But it is, how do we start building trust with our students, that we see them as students, that they are safe to feel seen and be heard in that space. And in a classroom like that, it is a long and arduous path, but it's not one that's completely impossible either. You slowly you see them every single day, and you can slowly build trust with them that you're going to show up. And in a lot of ways, sometimes it's just like doing something stupid that you suck at and they're good at, and it breaks down the barriers of like hierarchy. Like you're the authoritarian control and they're just a submissive person in your realm. And I think of the book, Creativity Inc. by
Ed Campbell.
Yes, who is the, I think, founder of Pixar, and he talks about.
Don't worry, I'm a walking version of Google. I've got your back.
I love it. So in Creativity Inc., Ed talks about Pixar University, I think he calls it, which is a system where they take, there could be a CEO sitting next to a light engineer, sitting next to a janitor, and they're like taking a lesson on molding a pot out of clay or painting. And they're learning these skills that is really just allowing them to show up vulnerably and see each other past these like hierarchies of control and see each other as humans and break down those systems of resentment, really, so that everybody is playing and learning and kind of going through the same process of like, how and why do we learn, and how can this be pleasurable and enjoyable. And I think you start there. If you have a classroom full of students who genuinely push back at every inch that you give them, is you start finding ways to build trust with them. And then on the other side of the coin is allowing them opportunities to earn trust from you.
You know, that thing with Creativity Inc. And by the way, like Ruckus Maker, check that book out. It's Ruckus Maker approved. We read that in the mastermind, I think in 2016. That was one of the, I
Okay.
know when we launched our group mentorship and coaching program in 2016, that was one of the first books we read. It's fantastic.
It's
But what you were
fantastic.
talking about there, like, you know, the neat thing too is that painting or clay or whatever, it's removing sort of like status and ego, you know,
Right.
and it's also leveling the playing field and everybody can learn. And I'll never forget, like I had a class of like, how do you keep seniors engaged, right? When
Right.
they've basically
Right.
got their credits, graduation's right there. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I do not care anymore. That's a tough group.
Right.
So
Right.
my bright idea was to steal sort of that Google exploration time. You know what I mean? Whatever they called it, 20% time, or you know, just
Oh, 20
to
time.
yeah, to look, you know, at passion projects. And so I sort of had a menu of ways we could explore, sort of like the
Mm-hmm.
boundaries, the containers, but what you explored within that was up to you. And then you had to produce something, right, of value to the class community at the end.
Yeah.
And I truly think one of the two reasons it worked. One, there was so much freedom and creativity and curiosity for the students to explore. And it wasn't like, I'm going to force you to read this book, you know, or whatever. Like, it wasn't about compliance. You know, it was really,
Right.
they probably saw me giving control to them. And it's like, huh, this is
Right.
new. And I did a project right along with them, right? And so
Yeah.
I would go around and there'd be time where me as facilitator or teacher could give feedback on Ryan's project. But also when I was working, like kind of, you know, please don't bother me. I'm trying to do my project right now, right? Like we'll do
Right.
feedback and stuff like that. But I'm a student with you in this moment. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't want to
Right.
be distracted or off task. So that's something you know, interesting you brought up with that status thing. Yeah, cool. So you brought up vulnerability as well. Actually, I want
Yeah.
to add one more thing. I think so. One thing I want to be clear in saying too, and these are my words, not you, right? The sort of the hyper vigilance defend mode, you can still like kind of be strict. It's not my personality. I know people who can pull this off, but you know what I mean? Like you can
Mm-hmm.
sort of have a very orderly, somewhat strict classroom environment and kids know you radically care and love them, right? And
Right.
are curious about who they are, but you're just kind of like a strict individual. And so that
Mm-hmm.
still can work, but kids need to know. And this is what I tell Ruckus Makers all the time. Your staff cares about two questions. Do I belong at this school? Do I belong here? And am I doing a good job? And if
Mm-hmm.
you can answer those questions and definitely answer them in a positive way, in a candid way, then you're going to have a staff who will do anything for you. And I think students would be the same, right? Do I belong in this classroom?
Absolutely.
Am I doing a good job on whatever we're supposed to be doing? So,
Right.
yeah,
And like along those lines is really, that is actually a prerequisite of that going well. Because if you just say, hey, you can do whatever you want to, this is a fun space,
yeah, fun
that's
space.
a recipe for disaster as well, right? Like if there
Yeah,
are no
yeah, yeah.
rules, you are not going to get any productive learning done. So you do need to
Right.
find the balance of like, hey, these are the rules and these are the expectations, and I will hold you
Mm,
accountable, but I'm going to do it in a way in which I see you as a human, and I know people make mistakes, and I've been there before. I was again the student who maybe didn't follow all of the rules. So I can have empathy for that. And also, I'm going to hold you accountable so that when I pull you aside and have a conversation with you, it's not an indictment of your character. It's not that you're a terrible human being because you showed up 5 minutes late. And I know you're lying to me about this or that, but it is holding them responsible and extending them a blank slate the next day to actually prove themselves like, hey, you made a mistake. let's do better next time.
Yeah, right on. You brought up vulnerability in the last question as well, being vulnerable in the classroom, and you had a master's thesis on the role of vulnerability in the classroom. So, what did you research? Yeah, what did you find out and discover through that process?
Right. I think the thought of vulnerability is really just it lays it's built on this foundation of trust and belonging and failure. And so it's kind of this piece of like you need to model these skills for your students. If you want your students to show up and be seen and take chances with their learning, if you want them to be able to try creating something or publicly speaking and possibly screw up, they really do need to feel that it's an environment in which that this regularly takes place. So the role of vulnerability is really just that piece of being a person in the classroom who's facilitating, who is building trust, who is taking chances, who is not posing themselves as the ultimate authority, even though, of course, like you're the person who's in charge and you are facilitating, but you're also a person who is willing to say like, hey, I threw this thing together. It might be terrible, but bear with me, give it a shot. It might be amazing as well. And I can't tell you how many lessons I've had that started like that and they just completely fell apart because I overlooked this or that or ran out of materials or whatever. Because the reality of trying to create lessons that are fun and engaging and exciting are you're going to have to try some new things and they're not always going to be perfect and you don't have enough time to fail safe everything. And so that vulnerability is really just the modeling the willingness to step into uncertainty, to try things for the greater good, and also building the trust and receiving the trust that, hey, things can go poorly and we can learn from that and move forward.
Last question before the last questions I ask all my guests. The right path for you was to figure out where you could be whole and be intentional, right, and be present, right. And so your path took you different and out of the classroom. I often talk to my audience, right? If the ruckus makers don't stick around, like who will, And so I do
Yes.
advocate, right, for people figuring out like how to stick with it. But
Right.
if you're burned out, you're burned out, like that kind of thing. Like I'm not saying stick with it if you're done. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
But what I'm curious about you, since you really like to explore this topic, like what does it look like to stay within this environment and be pouring out of a place of wholeness, right? As a ruckus maker, whether you're in the classroom or as an administrator. Yeah, but do you have any feedback for the audience on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I will say, the burnout for me started many years ago, and I did find a way to like genuinely enjoy it. One of the things I did, and this is kind of seems silly, but I actually applied to other jobs for a while, for like 4 years. And that sounds like the opposite, but what I did was, and I got offered probably one or two jobs a year throughout that process. And I was like, this is just getting me better and giving me options. But each time I was able to choose teaching because I'm like, I know that working as a warehouse manager in this space or sitting in a cubicle for this company, I know that I'm not going to have the same level of enjoyment in my job and passion for what I do. And
Yeah,
ultimately, I continued to come back and choose teaching.
yeah,
But I think for the day to day, the biggest thing you can do is have grace with yourself. It's not going to be perfect. I wanted perfect, and it's quite literally not possible. There's so many fires you need to put out in a day. There's so many lessons that can be done better. But I think when you think about growth, it's going to be how do I actually create my day to day so it's a little bit easier? And a core principle of that is like, how do we start building trust with students and creating a space in which they want to belong? Because that makes your job so much easier. If they genuinely want to be there and they genuinely at least care enough about you as a person that they're going to follow along and engage with you from time to time, it's removing a lot of friction from your job. So it's choosing your battles, right? Of like, what is really important to me right now and what am I going to improve on this year, but not to the point at which I want it to be, but next year I'll come back, I'll revisit and I'll get better. So I think that was a big piece. I think pausing and writing down the pieces of teaching that you are grateful for, like actually articulating it, was one of the most powerful pieces for me because when you look at that list and you consider any other profession, you're going to find about a dozen things that are replaceable. You could move into administration or you could move into the district center, or you could take a job for e-learning, sitting at home. And this is just through my own lens because everybody is in a different situation. But there are so many unique, positive experiences that come from teaching that you're not going to find anywhere else. And so I think by articulating that, you're not only highlighting the pieces that you do like, because we like to focus on if something is not going well. We have one class that we just, no matter what we do, we can't seem to win, or we have one parent who's whatever it is, we focus on those pieces. And each week gets framed by this negative confirmation bias of like, my job sucks, my life is terrible, and I'm suffocating. But if you do the opposite and you do try to get really clear about what are the pieces that I like if I wanted to make a move somewhere else, what are things that I'd be comparing the pros and cons on the teaching side? I think that's really powerful as well.
Great. Thank you for that answer. So the last three questions I ask guests are always the same. The first one would be, if you could put one message on all school marquees for one day, right? What would that message be from Ryan?
I have one that I don't think is appropriate, so I'll pass. But I'll summarize it with letters instead of F-bombs. But if you never F around, you'll never find out. Yeah. I love the idea of that, of like, how do we unapologetically seek failure, and how do we like find places to fail so that we can build our capacity for resilience and learn. I think if I actually had to put something on a school marquee, it would be to find the courage to fail spectacularly today. Just underlying the fact that it is really brave to fail, to put yourself in a situation in which you might fail. And that's by definition vulnerability, right? But it's also reframing the idea of failure, that it is this beautiful thing that teaches us so much, and honestly teaches us so much more than we could ever learn through just regurgitating facts and rote memorization.
Right on. And if you were building your dream school, Ryan, right, there were no constraints in terms of resources. Your only limitation was your ability to imagine. What would be the three guiding principles of this dream school?
Well, the teachers would all no, I'm just kidding. I think my three pillars would be, I think I'd build around agency, promoting agency, and everything that falls under that, which would be like creating intrinsic motivation and playful learning and fun experiences. I would also build around failure, as we spoke about, failure as being this method for really narrowing in a very human process on how do we actually create ideas that are our own, and how do we actually work through that process of refining and coming up with new iterations based on our failures and learning through that rather than avoiding it at all costs. And then my third pillar would be belonging. I would create spaces in which students feel that they belong, which I know it might be a hot topic these days, but it really is a space in which students can feel that they feel safe to show up, and it's creating psychological safety for every student to come to a space and know like, hey, I do belong here, because that is a prerequisite for learning.
Well, we discussed a lot, covered a lot of ground on today's conversation. Ryan, thanks for being a wonderful guest. Of everything we did talk about, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
We need more well-intentioned rule breakers. We need people who are willing to lean into disruptive education, things that disrupt the systems at play and create meaning and spark curiosity and fuel change for teachers and students to really get back to the roots of wanting to learn.
Hey, Ruckus Makers, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something in you so that you want to do school different, or maybe you have a new idea about how to reimagine education on your campus, then check out My Principal Coach. It's your AI-powered leadership mentor. It's trained on 10 years of mastermind and private coaching experience that I've had. It's like having a world-class Ruckus Maker mentor in your pocket 24/7. You can start your free 7-day trial at myprincipalcoach.com.